Hey, Stacey David here with the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. Now, what is this? Well, it's a podcast that covers everything automotive, everything mechanical, everything that's just cool about the automotive lifestyle. And since that's just about everything, you're going to love it.
Today's podcast is brought to you by our friends at Painless Performance.
Let's get rolling. Okay, my guest today is none other than Dennis Overholser. Now, you might be thinking, I've heard that name before. Doesn't he have that mustache? No, you're thinking Dennis Gage. This is Dennis Overholser. Dennis is the mastermind behind Painless Wiring, and he is a hot rodder through and through. He's a good friend of mine, one of the most innovative people that I've met in this industry, and somebody who has done so much behind the scene. So, Dennis, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Stacey. Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here, man. All right, the first thing that everybody wants to know about, somebody especially that owns a company or is has received awards at SEMA or stuff is, are you a real gearhead? And I know you are, but let's talk about your background. How'd you get started, man?
When I was on the corn farm in Indiana, I was always in the hot rod magazines and so forth. So I built a little 33 three-window coupe with a flathead in it. So I was the only kid in the county, in the high school, that had a hot rod. So
you had a 32 three-window in high school?
33 three-window,
Oh,
yes.
my gosh. You had the car. You were the guy.
I know, and I've been trying to find another one, and all of them are chopped. Mine wasn't chopped. I want back like original.
Really?
No fenders, just...
But unchopped top. Now, was the body channeled? Or,
yes.
Okay, so you channeled it.
Yes.
Okay,
It was sitting down over the frame and so forth, so...
That's very cool. With a flathead in it. How many carburetors? Probably 3.
Well, it started with 1 and it ended up with 2.
Okay.
Thanks to, I think, J.C. Whitney at the time, about the only place you could get
yeah,
parts.
J.C. Whitney or Speedway Motors.
That's it.
Or Honest Charlie's. You probably had access to Honest Charlie's.
Yeah, I read about it, but most of the time, being in Indiana where I was at then, everything came out of Chicago. So
okay.
Worked out pretty good. Or Speedway, because when I got out of the military, I wanted to build a T-roaster, so I had to have a fiberglass body.
Oh, yeah.
And it came out of Speedway. So, yep.
Tell me about the military. You said you were in the military. Let's talk about that. How'd you get into the military? Did you volunteer? Did you get drafted?
Well, I was here in Nashville going to Nashville Auto Diesel College.
Okay.
At night, flipping burgers at McDonald's during the day.
We've all done that.
Yeah, and so I got my letter draft notice from the military, and since I wasn't in a 4-year college, I was not exempt.
Okay. And what year was this?
This was in late '65.
Okay.
I graduated out of high school in '65. So it was like November of '65. I got the letter. I was going to school here, so I decided, well, I did not want to go in the Army or the Marines because I knew I was going to go to Vietnam probably. And so I went to the Air Force recruiter, talked to him, and wanted to know what my SAT scores were and so forth. Signed me up the same day.
So you enlisted when you saw that you had gotten your draft card.
Right.
Yeah.
I enlisted.
Smart move.
I thought it was at the time.
Yeah.
And I still do. I get teased a lot from different guys that were in the Army and the Marines.
Oh, sure.
And I tell them I was in the Air Force. He says, Air Force, they only had the smart guys,
Well, you had the SAT scores.
Well, I did.
And that's the first thing the guy asked you.
That's the first thing the recruiter asks.
Yeah.
Is what's your SAT score? So mine was 95 in electronics and 90 in mechanical. So they put me in electronics school to work on the Minuteman missiles.
Yeah.
And then I didn't like that. So long story short, I flunked out of that class and went and got into the mechanics side of it.
Yeah.
But,
Well, now there's an interesting story there because you didn't flunk because you didn't know the stuff. What happened there?
Well, okay, I'll tell you the story. Here's the real deal. I found out that I was going to be in a silo working on these Minuteman missiles up in Minot, North Dakota.
Yeah.
Number one, it's about 40 bazillion degrees below zero. And number two, I'm going to be in a silo where it's claustrophobic.
Yeah. Not your thing.
That's not my thing. So I purposely flunked the class. Got called in on the carpet in front of the captain. Oh, he's livid. He just
because
called
he
me
knew
on.
you were smart. Yeah.
Yeah, everything was good until I said, no, this dog ain't going to hunt. You know?
Yeah.
So after about 15 minutes of scolding me up one side and down the other and all kinds of words.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, Airman, just what is it you want to do? And I said, sir, I want to be a mechanic.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he says, are you nuts? So we talked about it some more. He said, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll change you from the 60th Squadron, electronic school, to the 48th Squadron, to mechanic school, but you got to pass top of the class.
Top of the class, yeah.
So we did, and there was 16 of us in the class, and I ended up number 2. My friend Eisenhower, he made a 96, and I made a 95. So everybody was happy. And then next thing I know, they're calling us all into the big auditorium place thing we had there on base.
Yeah.
And we're looking for volunteers to go to Germany, England, and France.
Yeah.
And I says, oh, I'll go to Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better. They've got to be better than Vietnam. So I did, and they
Well,
sent
good,
me.
good.
They sent me three years duty.
Yeah.
To Germany, and I worked in vehicle maintenance. I worked on cars and trucks and cranes and anything with
Tanks,
tires. And,
anything, yeah.
yeah, just almost anything.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. Okay, so when you got out of the military, you became a mechanic, you started working. How did Painless come about? Okay, here's the thing, because most people hate wiring harnesses. Most people hate wiring at all. And, you talk to almost any hot rodder, they love their motor. A lot of them are into chassis. Some might be into paint. Some might be into interior. But when it comes to wiring, all of them hate it. So what prompted you to go into a business making aftermarket wiring harnesses? I mean, it sounds crazy.
Well, it was
But it's so important.
Yeah, it was. When I got out of the military, I went to work for a Ford tractor dealer, and I was a mechanic, diesel mechanic mostly, diesel hydraulics and so forth. But when I go home, I had multitude of hot rods. I mean, all kinds of street rods, because I was heavily involved with NSRA, National Street Rod Association, for a long time.
Yes, I know.
Wore a shirt and was division director and so forth.
Yeah.
So I would travel all over the country in either my 40 Buick, or I had 2 of those, or my 38 Chevrolet, or whatever it might be that I had at the time.
So you were deep into the hot rod thing.
Very deep.
Yeah.
Very deep. And I built all
A
my
lot of
own
people don't realize that.
Yeah, I built all my own stuff. I've always had a shop behind my house.
Yeah.
And so I got, because of my experience in the electronic school, after I got out of the military, I went through 2 years of DeVry electronic school. So I kept using some of that knowledge that I had built, and I wired my own stuff. And a lot of guys would find out if I was doing that, so they would, hey, can you come help me with this? And so after hours and on weekends, that's what I would do, just go help wire the cars and so forth. So I worked at the tractor dealer for about 20 years, and I was approached by a mutual friend, and he says, I know a guy that has a wiring harness company in Fort Worth, and he builds harnessing for the van conversion industry.
Yeah.
And he's looking for someone to help him develop a wiring harness for hot rods to kind of diversify.
Yeah, this is when the street rod thing is really starting to get into full swing.
It's hot.
Yeah.
It's hot. So he gave me all the tools that I needed to do it. And so at nighttime, I would work at the tractor dealer during the day, and at nighttime I'd go to the factory over on the west side of town and start developing harnessing and ordering parts and different colors of wire and these type things to build the first harness. Now, the initial thought was, all these years that I've been doing this, everyone was using a big square piece of plywood,
I remember
piece of
them,
metal, and all that kind of stuff.
You had to mount that thing somewhere.
And it took up so much space.
Yeah.
And besides that, it was a real pain to get up underneath it and get your neck just right so you could see it, to put the wires underneath the screws.
Especially under a T-bucket or a 32 or something.
Nightmare.
Yeah.
I said, there's got to be a better way. So I thought, well, if I can figure out a way to do all this before it ever gets out of the box, then all they got to do is mount it, and they're done up underneath the dash. Mm-hmm. So that was my theory that I wanted to run with, which would make it basically a universal type harness.
Yeah.
Because no two hot rods are the same.
No.
I mean,
well, no two restorations are the same.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always differences.
so the gist of the situation was at the time, here's the fuse block, you mount it, I'm going to give you tons of wire, you lay it out the way you want to lay it out.
Your wiring is long enough. I always appreciated that, yeah.
And so every wire, a group of wires at the time, if it was a dash, it was tagged with a paper tag that says dash, and it coincided with the instruction manual, the brown wire this and yellow wire for this and so forth and so on. And so it worked out pretty good.
Were you the first one that did kind of the pre-wired fuse box?
To my knowledge.
Yeah.
There may have been someone, but I don't.
So you're the first one that got away from putting it on the board and stuff where you had to individually run the wires to the fuse block. You did the pre-wired fuse block.
Yes.
That took so much work out of wiring a car.
Well, that was the whole thought process that I had.
Yeah.
Number one, let's do this to where it's not so taxing, especially on a hot summer day in Texas. You're laying out there underneath that thing, and it's 400 degrees inside underneath the dash. And so that wasn't very, very good, but
it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like one of the things I've seen with you over the years is you really encourage people to get out there and drive their vehicles and to build a usable vehicle. Mm-hmm. And your wiring harnesses are very much designed to do that, to be able to go in fairly simply for a guy to be able to get out and drive. Has that kind of been the motto of Painless over the years?
Yes, in a way, because we wanted to make sure that the product that we sold a consumer, an individual, a builder, whoever it might be, we wanted the quality to be the utmost. Mm-hmm. For several years, we built harnessing for General Motors.
Yeah.
And we had to be QS 9000 compliant.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And we still are. So we're the only ones, to my knowledge, in the industry that guarantees our product for life.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. So you're doing things to OEM spec.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's huge.
We use the machines that are recommended for that particular terminal. If it's a GM terminal going into the back of a GM style fuse block, we use Packard presses, all the special machines to do all that with.
Yeah.
Once we set up a machine, everything is we use a micrometer to check the proper crimp depth and all those type things to make sure everything is correct.
A lot of people ask, what is the most daunting thing on a project? And I would say most people would say wiring. And just because they just don't know how to do it, it's very intimidating. And it's usually you get a vehicle that's been jerry-rigged. And that's where the guys at Painless, really came into their own. When Dennis first started coming out with these wiring harnesses, they really changed the way people could work on their cars. Up until that time, there was a lot of speed parts, there was a lot of suspension parts, but there wasn't a lot to help you with wiring. And it was a main thing, especially when it comes to restoration. You always have to mess with wiring. You can get by with not doing a paint job. You can get by without doing an interior or maybe some suspension upgrades, but wiring, you got to have it. If you have a wiring project or if you have a project that you are looking to restore, you're going to have to deal with wiring. Check out the guys at Painless Performance. They can help you out.
Now, aren't you selling tools as well? Don't you sell crimpers?
Yes.
And all of those things that a person needs to do the wiring.
Yeah. What we sell is for the average guy that's only going to use them once or twice. You can buy some Packard crimpers that are $500, $600, $700 a piece.
I've got some of them,
and we have them at the factory.
Yeah.
But what we sell in our catalog is specialty crimpers and so forth for the rollover crimps and those kind of things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's another question that comes up a lot with guys, because this industry changes all the time. And I mean, you've been in it almost since the beginning of the street rod movement. So you've seen a ton of changes. You've seen where, we've gone from pulling harnesses and stuff out of junkyards to front subframes out of Volares and stuff going under cars, to subframes, to full frame swaps from guys like the Roadster Shop and things like that. What changes? How do you roll with those punches? First of all, as a wiring company, how have you adapted to harnesses for fuel injection and for some of these electronic things that are going, electronic controlled vehicles? How do you stay on top of that?
Well, we have guys that work the tech line, and so we listen to them. And as you know, we travel all over the country doing different shows.
Yeah, you usually do seminars like at Street Rod Nats, don't you?
I do. I did a seminar. I've done several of them over the years there. So we listen to the consumer, the customer, to find out what they're building, what their needs are, and so forth. And then we'll take all that information and tabulate it out on a spreadsheet, and that kind of tells us which direction we need to go. And sometimes what it is today may be different tomorrow or next month. So we just have to see what they need, and then that tells us where we need to go.
Was there anything that you can think of over the years that you developed a product for because you thought it was going to be hot and it wasn't? Is there anything that you can think of?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The first one I did, when I was building my panel truck back in 93 and 94, and I finally put it on the road in 95, was the guys at Ford said, we'll give you an engine at a deeply discounted price, but you got to put a Ford in a Ford.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I can do that. Well, I got the engine, I started getting it put in, and I'm looking around. Nobody makes parts to put a Ford in a Ford. Nobody at the time.
Yeah.
So I managed to get an original Ford Mustang wiring harness from Ford to run the engine, but no one made brackets, nothing.
Yeah.
So I developed a complete set of bracketry to run AC, power steering, and alternator on the front of the Ford engine, which I put on the panel truck, and it's still on there today. And we introduced it at the SEMA show that year and won the best new product of the year in the street rod market. We sold about 30 kits, and that was it.
That was it.
That was it. It was a great deal.
Well, sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't.
So what new do you have coming out? What new and exciting stuff is happening at Painless?
Right now,
anything you can share with us, or?
Right now, we're working on some new Mopar harnessing.
Oh, nice.
And
the Mopar guys are going to love that.
Oh, we get calls for it all the time.
Now, is it an original harness, or is it
it'll be. We're starting out with the B bodies.
Okay.
And it'll be kind of a plug and play as much as we can make it at this time. As you ask any Mopar guy, and they say, what's the weakest link? And everyone will tell you the bulkhead connector.
Yeah.
So we totally redesigned it. Goes back in the original hole.
Oh,
made
nice.
New tooling and everything. And so we redesigned it to be able to pass through the current that the old style bulkhead would not. That's why they kept burning up. So we're going to do the B-body, and then our goal is to do Mopar and Ford like what we did with GM and make the Pro Series, which has several different applications. It comes unassembled, but it gives you all the parts you need to build it the way you want to build it.
That's nice. Okay, real quick, for a guy that's putting something together, I'm going to give you some scenarios here.
Okay.
Because one of the biggest questions you get is, what harness do I use? I know your guys on the tech line probably get that all the time. I address that question all the time at seminars, all that other kind of stuff. So, okay, so if a guy is doing a build on like a tractor or an off-road vehicle or something like that, what kind of harness would you recommend? This has no air conditioning, no extras, maybe a couple of off-road lights, something like that. What kind of harness would you recommend?
Well, we'd have to ask a few more questions than just that.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, is the electrical system going to be exposed to the elements, weather, mud,
Yeah, let's
ice,
say it is.
snow, and all
Yeah.
that? Then that tells us it needs to be a waterproof one.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got to find out what the options are going to be, down to the basic one, even our basic harness.
Yeah.
Everything's made for four-wheel,
Yeah.
four-wheel vehicles.
Yeah.
But I hand built one for my
Yeah.
my 6014 Ford tractor because I wanted to put an alternator on it.
Mm-hmm.
But once we have all the basics, when we know what the vehicle is, what it's going to be used for, and in what category, if it's going to be racing or if it's going to be street riding, if it's going to be whatever it might be, then off-road, then we can kind of steer them in the right direction.
Yeah. So the best advice that you could give somebody when they're working on their project and they're getting ready to order a wiring harness is to go through and decide and have all that ready to talk to you about what engine they're going to use, the way they're going to set up the interior, if they're going to run air conditioning, is it a resto mod, is it an original restoration? All of these are important because you make harnesses for like original restorations, plug and plays, and then you make something like in the middle that somebody's added some aftermarket add-ons.
Sure.
And then you also make like the full Pro Series for the full resto mod thing, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And those are three different worlds.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
And a good example is one I say a lot about is take a 68 Camaro.
Yeah.
Well, 68 Camaros are really popular, but we have to find out, just like you say, has it got the original dash, got the original engine, going to keep it all original? Then we have a direct fit plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it kind of everything's going to be pretty much original except maybe the dash, and it might change the engine. Then we have the other 68 Camaro harness that is semi-universal but designed, for that particular car because it's going to have the switching and so forth. Or if it's just going to be an all-out carry bar the door type thing, then we use the Pro Series because that way it gives the builder whatever he needs, and he can do it any way he wants to do it.
Ah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And it gives people something to be prepared for when they call your tech line.
Yes.
So the poor guy's not like, okay, what are you working on? I'm working on a Camaro. Come on. You've heard that before.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Well, Dennis, this has been great, man. Thanks for dropping by. Anytime you're in the neighborhood, drop on by. Love to have you on.
I'll be coming through here again later in the year on power tours.
Yeah,
So
going to be driving the panel?
I'll be in the panel truck.
Yeah.
So I may just stop by with my grandson and say hi. And,
Nice. When are you going to sell me that panel? I want that panel.
well, maybe I'll put it in my will. How's that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I'd hate to get it that way. That was, you're so well known for that panel. I love that panel.
I got to tell you a real quick story on the panel truck.
Yeah.
I was coming out of Knoxville one year. This has been several years ago. And whenever I come out of Knoxville, I have two ways to go home. I can go down to Birmingham and go across, or I can go to Memphis and go down. But I always look and see what the weather was for that day. And this particular day, it was thunderstorms coming out of Little Rock and going up into Memphis. And I said, okay, Birmingham was clean. So I cut down out of Knoxville down, 75 or whatever the highway is, and went down to Birmingham. And I'm coming out of Birmingham and on 20, and I'm headed west. And I've got a CB in it, always have had.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to the truckers talking and so forth. And this one truck guy says, "Wow, look at this old multicolored truck coming at us." I guess I could see two big trucks, down the highway coming at me. And then I heard the other guy key up and he says, "Oh yeah, that's that Painless guy. He drives that thing all over the country."
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's a true story. And I said, I keyed up and I said, "Thanks, guys. Be careful out there."
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's what happened.
Painless guy.
That Painless guy. He drives that thing all over the country.
Oh, that's cool. I'm sure he was a hot rodder.
Yeah. He probably was if he knew what it was, that type of deal. Yep.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for dropping by.
I appreciate it greatly, Stacey.
A successful automotive project takes planning and organization. But instead of using an old tablet or notebook, there's the Gears Deluxe Project Planning Book. This was designed to help you lay out a project, the parts, the tools, costs, and keep it organized with colored tabs, a pouch for receipts, and even a place to attach photos. If you decide to sell the vehicle, it serves as a complete history of what's been done. If you have a project or plan on starting one, the Gears Project Planning Book is the best way to lay it out and make it happen.
All right, this next question comes from Sean. And Sean says, hey, Stacey, I really have enjoyed the catalog Camaro project. He said, I'm planning on doing the same front end and rear end conversion on my 78 Z28. And for those of you that don't know, that's where I took the early Rally Sport style front end and rear end and have grafted it onto a later model, second gen Camaro. Mine's an 81. And he says, my question is, did you do any upgrades to the rear suspension? And also, what would you recommend for a car that's generally used as a street car? Well, Sean, those are great questions. Yes, I did do a rear suspension on that. You probably missed that show. That is a matching rear suspension that I got from Speedway Motors. Keep in mind, the front suspension that I did on it was from Speedway Motors, and the rear is one of those. Now, it features a cradle that uses trailing arms, like off of a C10 truck. So basically, I have like a NASCAR-style rear suspension in that thing. And, of course, it has a 9-inch rear end. And so it's just a real simple, very strong, very reliable rear suspension upgrade. So that's what I'm doing on my car. Now, going to one of the questions that you're talking about here, you say, what would you recommend for a car that's generally used as a street car? Okay, well, the key word here is generally used as a street car. So we're just going to take that to mean that it's primarily a street car. So if you're just doing primarily a street car, then a stock suspension is fine from a 70s car on up. I would, if you're going to do upgrades, I would start with the brakes and get yourself some good brakes on there. And then if you want to do more upgrades, your springs and your shocks, sway bars, that kind of things will make a world of difference on that stock suspension. Remember those cars in the 70s on up, that's not a whole lot different than the suspensions that are on current cars. So all you need to do is refine them a little bit. Now, if you're going to be venturing out on the autocross once in a while, or going to be doing it quite a bit, that's when you want to start looking at some of these full suspension upgrades. You know, like the one I did from Speedway Motors. Ring Brothers have those. Detroit Speed has them. You know, Holley sells those. There's a lot of people that have performance suspensions that is a whole cross member and then upper and lower control arms, coilover upgrade. Usually comes with new brakes. It goes to rack and pinion, which is a great upgrade. So you can see, you can spend a lot of money putting something like this together. Now, back to your question. If you go the high dollar route, does it make it a better street car? Well, yeah, because now you have rack and pinion steering, good disc brakes, all kinds of good stuff. However, if you've gone more of a performance, racing suspension or something you're going to do autocrosses with, naturally it's stiffer and it's going to be a little rougher. So if you're driving around in traffic, it's going to be rough. So that's where you get into, are you going to drive it on the street mostly? Or are you going to venture out on the track? And that's where you have to kind of choose where you want to put it. What a lot of people do these days is they put the high dollar suspensions on because it's impressive. So they walk around and they go, my car's decked out with Detroit Speed this or, this, that, and you've got all this nice stuff and you've spent umpteen thousands of dollars, but you're not using the suspension to what it's built for. You're just driving around on the street. So for that kind of situation, I would say that's money wasted. You need to spend the money on how you're going to drive the car. So if you're going back to generally a street car, if you are primarily going to drive your car on the street, man, I would put some nice springs and shocks on it, upgrade your sway bar, and I'd drive the fire out of that thing. And you will not be disappointed at all. All right, that's our show for today, which means you need to get out there and start working on something. Spend some time turning wrenches. You might be surprised how much you like it. Make sure you check out our website, staceydavid.com, because we've got all kinds of new products and some other great stuff that you're just going to love. Also, make sure to check out our social media. That's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, all at Official Stacey David. Our social media is where you're going to find all of the bonus content, the giveaways, the contests, the trivia. We even have extra viewer projects that focus on what you are working on. Also, the new season of Gears will be on MAV TV, and YouTube will be the place that you can view all of your favorite Gears episodes, as well as the full project builds that follow the project from beginning to end. Make sure to check out our new Gears coffee cars. This is a unique blend of coffee and cool stickers to collect that will appeal to anyone.
But the most important thing is get out there and turn some wrenches yourself. Get a project, start working on it, and if you don't have tools, check out Cornwell. They can help you out there.
All right, that's all the announcements. We're all up to date. We'll see you next time.